Which rookies have been the biggest surprises during the 2023 season in the wrong way? All that and more this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Are we even calling it Twitter anymore? Is it X?
X.
Are we just, I think we're just going to forever call it Twitter, right?
Yeah, it's forever Twitter. I'm sorry. I know Elon Musk made the brave decision to change it from a birdhouse to a regular house this week. For those of you who are on the Twitter app, you might have noticed that change. He's making big moves. Got to give him some credit there. But you know who's not making some big moves? Some of these rookies, yeah. Marcus.
By the way, that's Kate Madjuk. You guys know her. Follow her on X at Kate Madjuk. Yes, Kate, we're going to be talking about some of the rookies that are maybe struggling a little bit, that have surprised us. We've got to start with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. This one is fascinating and frustrating to me, to use two F words that are a bad one. Kate, I want to talk about his role in this offense, because I when they drafted him, I really thought, okay, this is a slot receiver who's going to play 70% of the snaps. He might be able to get 70 catches as a rookie. Hasn't been the case at all.
Has not been the case at all. And, you know, like he's running routes, which is good. Not as many as starters, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. You know, they're definitely favoring those two veteran wide receivers, which I understand. But yeah, through 5 weeks, 18 targets, 12 receptions, just 62 receiving yards. That is 5.2 yards per reception. You don't love to see that. He's playing a lot out of the slot. And Marcus, you know, we've talked about, if they're not going to utilize a slot wide receiver on a significant amount of plays, he's not going to be on the field, which is so frustrating. You know,
and usually I wouldn't panic too much.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, he'll eventually become one of the top two receivers, you know, on this team, and you spend a first round pick. But this is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Like, I don't see them moving on from Metcalf, who is like 25 years old and playing really well. And I really don't see Seattle moving on from Lockett, because he's the route runner that gets open, and it feels like he's going to be a lifelong Seahawk.
It doesn't feel like there's any reason for them to move on from either of these wide receivers. Like, it feels like if they did make a move ahead of the trade deadline, it would be just to, like, for the sake of making a move. Now, like, interestingly, here's the fun stat of the day. Jaxon Smith-Njigba actually leads this entire receiving core in yards after the catch. You know why that is? Because his average depth of target is 3.3 yards from the line of scrimmage. That is just such a disgraceful usage of the talents that Jaxon Smith-Njigba have. I'm going to remind everybody that this guy played side by side along Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, who were both like, you know, Garrett Wilson, obviously Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2022. Chris Olave put up a pretty good fight to keep his name in the conversation to win that award. And Jaxon Smith-Njigba, when he was utilized, was outplaying them. So interesting gravitation sort of away from the usage of
and
a
Marvin
slot
Harrison,
receiver.
by the way.
And Marvin Harris, you know, he deserves the show in and of itself. But this, like, you know, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I think, you know, you're not happy. He's obviously droppable in redraft leagues. He should not be on any rosters in redraft leagues, but I do think that this is an opportunity to buy low on Jaxon Smith-Njigba. These wide receivers, you know, obviously DK Metcalf is here for the long haul. Tyler Lockett's getting older. You know, I think, again, like you mentioned, probably a Seahawk for life here, but you know, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, his time will come. We know the talent is there. It just hasn't come to fruition. And to be honest, I just don't love the way they've utilized him to this point. is this one of those kind of things where like rookie earn your stripes?
No, I
Like,
don't think so because w- even if he does, let's say even if he starts playing better, he's not going to surpass DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the depth chart. And I think we know the one thing about Pete Carroll is he wants to use a lot of different formations. He wants to use the tight ends. He wants to run the ball. I when the Seahawks lost both of their offensive tackles, like in week 1 or week 2, I thought, okay, maybe this is a chance for JSN. They're going to get rid of the ball quicker. He's going to get a bunch of targets. And it was actually the opposite. Like they just kind of stopped throwing to him altogether. So I don't know what to do here, Kate. The dynasty community has really pivoted off JSN. So going into the month of September, his overall ADP was 16.6. Now it has dropped to basically 30. In terms of rookie receivers, Puka Nacua has officially passed him in ADP. Jordan Addison now as wide receiver 1 in this rookie class. He's now being drafted as wide receiver 17 overall. And I got to be honest, it still feels a little rich to me.
it feels rich, but man, this upside is so darn high.
I know.
The upside is high. But I think, maybe to that point, yeah, maybe this is time we adjust our ranks. But I still don't think you can look at Jaxon Smith-Njigba and the skills he has and pivot away from those just after, we've been so spoiled, Marcus, with
I'm not
immediate
selling low
rookie
on him,
production. Do not sell low on him.
but I'm
I'm
also
comfortable buying. I'm
okay.
comfortable buying.
Let's go through a couple of recent trades over the last week because I want your thoughts here. Jaxon Smith-Njigba for Michael Pittman. I'm going to assume you're JSN there.
JSN.
Okay. Let's get to a different one. JSN for Tutu Atwell and a 2024 first round pick.
JSN. Silence.
I think I would lean the 2024 first round pick and hope to get a receiver in a better situation next year.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
All right, here's another one. Jaxon Smith-Njigba for Deontay Johnson and a 5th round pick.
And a 5th round pick?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll take JSN.
One more. Jaxon Smith, and this is interesting. Jaxon Smith-Njigba for Stephon Diggs.
I'll take Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, I'm the same way. We'll see. The Seahawks had a bye last week. They play the Bengals this week in Cincinnati. I'm hoping now that JSN back in Ohio can have a nice performance for some of the former Buckeye fans. So let's see. I'm not panicking too much, but it's certainly not a great situation. Okay, let's talk about another running back or another player. I gave it away. A running back who is in a bad situation right now with his current team. Next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had playing daily fantasy sports. You can win up to 25 times your money this football season. Again, all you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less than on the projected stats, and then place your entry. They also have this thing called the PrizePick reboot policy, which reboots your entry if one of your players gets injured for NFL games and for college football top 25 matchups. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match worth up to $100. I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. We'd also like to tell you about the Locked On NFL Kickoff live show. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel, Host Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and so much more. Plus, get in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Okay, let's talk about our guy Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been injured the last couple of weeks in Detroit. David Montgomery just going on an absolute tear right now. How concerned are you about his usage with the Lions?
Pretty concerned, just considering where we drafted him in our dynasty drafts. The usage has kind of spoken for itself, right? We know that David Montgomery has been the guy. But Dan Campbell on Wednesday came out, commented on the workload dispersal between these two running backs, mentioning David Montgomery, said that guy carries the load. The other one is a changeup. You always want a guy that can take on 20 to 25 carries. Not great, Bob. Not great. You do not want to hear that. You're not gonna, I don't know, Marcus. I'm feeling concerned. Obviously, I think Jahmyr Gibbs has the edge in terms of yards per carry, not even by much. Has the edge in terms of yards after contact per attempt. I don't know. He's got a higher stuff rate. Like these two are kind of like neck and neck. I think from a rushing perspective in terms of their upside and what they offer on the ground. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs has the upside in the receiving game, but it's not Jahmyr Gibbs who's carrying the ball 20 times a game. It's David Montgomery. So I am particularly concerned after hearing these comments from Dan Campbell.
I kind of wish we would have done this show like 2 days ago, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, how close in your rankings do you have Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane? Because based on just what we've seen so far, you'd have a really hard time ranking Gibbs higher for any other reason except for draft capital. Like, that's really the only reason. But now that Achane's going to be out for at least the next 4 games due to a knee injury, you're not going to get him back until at least week 11. Maybe that's enough to just keep Gibbs higher in your ranks. But how close is it for you?
I still think there's a decent gap there. Devon Achane, Achane. Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. To this point, obviously he's a smaller running back, 5'9", 188 pounds. My biggest Achane. Yeah, we need
he officially came out and said that.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
So coming out, right? Like, my general concern with him is that he was kind of a one-trick pony. He's very, very fast, and that is, kind of what he has to offer. It turns out that that's fine. That speed is genuinely all he needs. But Marcus, my concern for Achane at this point, again, has that smaller frame, and he's already been a little banged up to start his NFL career. That kind of gives me a little bit of a red flag. Obviously suffered the knee injury, going on IR, but he to this point hasn't looked overly durable, and I'm kind of wondering, like, does his size have something to do with that?
Probably. I mean,
that's probably what's like close or furthering the gap between these two guys for me.
He also looks really small on the football field. And I know that's, kind of arbitrary, but like, you want your running backs to look like tanks, and that's just not him, right? And it doesn't really matter because he's been this effective, but he's gotten banged up down multiple times, and now we're not going to see him for the next month and a half or so. So I get it. Yeah. As for Gibbs,
had a foot injury in November 2022, shoulder injury coming off the preseason, and then a knee injury that landed him on IR. Like, you're right. So, in terms of like that sort of, he looks small, I think you're accurate there. And like, for comparison, You look at Deuce Vaughn, who is literally one of the smallest running backs to play
Yeah.
the game, and he genuinely looks like a tank. Like
Yeah.
he looks
He's
much
short and
bigger.
squatty, right?
Yes, he feels like he plays a lot bigger than that, and I don't think that the same can be said for Achon.
Yeah. As for Gibbs, right now on Dynasty League Football, he's being drafted as RB5, 18th overall. That feels really high to me. And the argument against him, or the argument for him being that high is, who are you going to put ahead of him? There are a few running backs behind him, like, and I'm going to mention this name again. I think I would rather just have Kenneth Walker, who is significantly bigger on a run first team, and I think is going to be the workhorse there for a while, rather than Gibbs, because of what you just mentioned. Like, if Dan Campbell feels like we always have to have somebody paired with Gibbs who can have, in his words, 20 to 25 carries a game, I just don't know, like, week to week, if you can trust Gibbs at all.
Yeah, especially given, let's look at the contract situation. Even for David Montgomery, they gave him a sizable contract,
Yeah.
3 years, $18 million. I think 11 million guarantees. Like,
Well, and
they're
he's
not.
playing well. Like, there's
He's
absolutely
playing
no
well.
reason to move
There's
on from him.
exactly, like, again, kind of like I mentioned. If the Seahawks were to move on from one of their wide receivers, it's just for the sake of making a move. The same thing stands.
Yes.
The run game's working, and like, this is a winning team right now. They're not going to shake things up just because fantasy managers are displeased with the fact that they're not using him, even despite this high draft capital. But I'm going to be honest, like, generally speaking, these were the concerns I had about Jahmyr
Yep.
Gibbs, and I let myself get talked into it, which is very frustrating. Very frustrating to
We all
know.
do it. I want to ask you about one more other running back before we move on to a tight end. Zach Charbonnet, the backup to Kenneth Walker, who I just mentioned, being drafted as RB4 in this class. Really has been, for most of the offseason, was RB3. You concerned at all about Charbonnet?
Not yet. Um, just kind of in a holding pattern. I don't see any reason necessarily to move on from him. Obviously you want to see some more usage, but I think when he's gotten the ball, he's looked really good.
He
Uh,
has looked good. It's just almost nothing in the passing game through 4 games, uh, averaging, about 5 carries a game. I mean,
yeah,
it feels like he's gonna be a guy that's not a change of pace, but like just a guy they rotate in every once in a while.
this is the problem when an offense has way too many weapons, just regardless of position. I really do. I think Charbonnet has kind of earned a fair bit more carry share moving forward. Right up there, surpassing Kevin Walker in yards per attempt, PFF rushing grade, right on pace with yards after contact per attempt. Like, he's doing everything right. So that's, part of why I'm not looking to move on from either. But Marcus, like, it is really, really difficult to measure these very talented players when they're in an offense with this
Yeah,
many offensive weapons, because the volume,
just isn't there.
barring injury, isn't there.
Let's talk about a tight end in Las Vegas who we expected a lot more from early in the season next. This episode is brought to you by Jase. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They'll handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using our promo code LOCKEDON. That's all one word, locked on, at checkout on jasemedical.com. That is JASE medical.com. All right, Kate, the last person that we're going to talk about here is Michael Mayer. So a lot of us really liked Michael Mayer going into the draft process. I know most people had him either as the number 1 or number 2 rookie tight end. Fell a little bit in the draft. I think some people were anticipating he'd be a first round pick. Fell to the top of the second round. The Raiders made a move up to go get him, and he's basically been non-existent in the first 4 games of the year. 2 total targets. He did have a little bit better game in week 5, 2 catches for 39 yards, but
Ooh.
how much are you panicking here?
I'm going to defer to you on this one, Marcus, because I this is actually something that I wanted to text with you about and get your input on and see if this is maybe a buy low opportunity for Michael Mayer. Obviously, like we knew coming out of the draft, just a top tier tight end, but not just as a receiver, as like a top blocking option. 800 plus receiving yards in each of his final 2 seasons with Notre Dame. Great route runner. He's like, he's got size. He's got, the ability to track a deep ball. Like he's got literally everything you need. Maybe outside of like the speed factor, but
Yeah.
even there, like it's not bad. I think from like a pure skills perspective, he's still among the top tier tight ends in this class, but it just hasn't produced or hasn't, come to fruition with targets. Um, you know, but generally speaking, this offense just hasn't utilized its tight ends. They signed Austin Hooper. He's been a non-factor as well. You don't love to see that, but Michael Mayer, I still think he's the same tight end they drafted, right? Like
Yeah.
he's just, the usage hasn't been there, ranks 4th in receiving routes run among rookie tight ends this season. But like you've got, the Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laportas, and Luke Musgraves, who are all at 125 routes run plus. Then you have Michael Mayer in 4th at 70 routes run. Like there's a big tier gap between the usage and deployment in these tight ends in the receiving game, being targeted on just 8% of those routes run, and hasn't done a lot with it. So what are you making of Michael Mayer? Because I think much like, Zach Charbonnet, much like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, like I still firmly believe in the talent.
Yes.
But the usage is what is concerning to this point. Do you see this improving at all? And is this a buy low window?
I do see it improving. This is a buy low window because I think you're seeing the Raiders start to increase his usage. They want to get him more involved in the passing game. But I don't know that you should buy him right now because I keep thinking about this offense and I keep thinking about his role. I again, I want to make it clear. I think he's going to get better, but the ceiling I think is relatively low. I think even if he gets 6 targets a game, you're looking at somebody who could put up similar stats to like what Cole Kmet is in Chicago or what maybe Hunter Henry did like back in his early days with New England or like days back with the Chargers. I don't see somebody who is going to be the focal point of the passing offense or even like the number 2 passing option like we've seen Sam Laporta, our guy, do in Detroit. By the way, Sam Laporta, tight end 4 right now in Dynasty behind Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and TJ Hawkinson. Didn't take him very long to shoot all the way up there. I'll give you a real life scenario. I am in a Dynasty league with very short benches, 5 spots in your bench. And it's a tight end premium league, and somebody just dropped Michael Mayer, and I didn't pick him up. It cost me nothing to pick him up because I don't know how long it's going to take for him to get involved in this offense. And even when he does, is it going to be consistent enough? And will the ceiling be high enough for me to wait a year for him to get there? I don't know. This is looking like if you spent like an early second round pick on him in your rookie drafts, like probably a mistake.
Yeah, ranking has him at tight end 17 for the
Which
month of
feels about right
October.
to me. When you look at the
Yeah.
names that are ahead of him, David Njoku, Darren Waller, Okonkwo, Kmet, Ferguson, I'd rather have all those guys.
Yeah, I think the ranking feels like it makes sense. And I mean, looking at those, being drafted behind him also feels kind of reasonable. Greg Dulcich, Dalton Schultz, like, yeah, that feels very reasonable for
Yep.
Michael Mayer at this draft cost. He has been tumbling down draft boards since the draft. Every single month, I believe he's dropped at least a spot or 2 in ADP. Now at 162 average ADP. What is that? 162 divided by 12, folks. We're doing math. That is like an average 13 round pick. Whereas when he first started out as a rookie back in May, was being drafted 108 divided by, this is real-time math, folks. He was being drafted in the 9th round. So he's dropped a full 4 rounds since being drafted.
And it's warranted. Like if you're only
Yeah,
getting
absolutely.
in your best game, you're getting 3 targets. I mean,
And again, like speaking to the tight end position, we know this. Like this is not a secret. The tight end position, this can take a while to develop. And I think especially so for a guy like Michael Mayer, who is, I think, one of the most well-rounded tight ends. Like, Sam Laporta coming out, best receiving tight end in this class. Dalton Kincaid, great receiver. Like they had sort of niche roles because I don't think there were as many expectations that they were going to have a big role in their respective offenses as blockers. That's not the case with Michael Mayer. I think he's more balanced. And with that nuance comes, I think, the need to be a bit more patient. I'm not going to sell low on Michael Mayer, maybe not targeting him, right now, but
go out and target it. Okay, the last thing I'll say about Mayer is like, if he was tied to a better quarterback, I think I would be more willing to buy. Like, I'm trying to think of like who would you say was like the 10th best quarterback in the league right now? Kirk Cousins?
I think Kirk Cousins is better than 10.
Okay. Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
Okay. If he was with Matt Stafford or a younger version of Matt Stafford, I don't know, Dak Prescott, right? I would be more willing to buy because I think those quarterbacks in time are going to develop a chemistry. They're going to help him push his ADOT further down the field. With Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, this is just kind of who Jimmy Garoppolo is. Like he's a low volume passing quarterback who doesn't really add value to his pass catchers. So unless there's a quarterback change down the road, I really don't see him being a super efficient option, which makes me even less likely to go out and buy him.
Oh, this was a stressful show, Marcus. This was a very stressful show. Hopefully we get some super fun Patrick Mahomes scoring bonanza, Rashi Rice here on Thursday Night Football, because I'm going to need some uplifting.
Yes, we're all cheering for our guys Rashi Rice and Marvin Mims tonight. That's really what we're watching. That's a good segue because tomorrow on the show we're going to break down what we see on Thursday Night Football. So make sure you are downloading the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube, where we post shows every single day. Go follow Kate on Twitter/X at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier. Enjoy Thursday Night Football, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.